deadly attacks by Ukraine last, but you're not going to see it on any of the major. Let's talk about some of the other big news happening in the world. So the Western media, here's a story that the Western media is completely ignoring, and this is perhaps a story that maybe Tucker would have even covered on his show, but you're not going to see it on any of the major cable news channels tonight at all. You'll see it here on our show, but nowhere else probably. The Western media completely ignoring the multiple massive deadly attacks by Ukraine last night and today against civilian targets in Donetsk and Zaporozhye. The shelling was far and wide, guys. Some of the shelling that happened overnight in the early hours of this morning happened for an hour and a half. Consistent shelling in Zaporozhye, hitting residential areas specifically. These were the targets. There's no military significance to hitting these other than terrorism. That's exactly what this is. And last night, these shells raining down on Donetsk, which of course Donetsk, if you've been following it, if you have an uneducated person in your midst, someone who doesn't understand what's been going on since 2014, this is what's been going on since 2014. Nonstop genocide, terrorism attacking residential places since 2014. So if someone doesn't understand how this war started, it started here. It started back in 2014, killing multiple civilians. The city has been targeted, according to these reports, by the forces with heavy artillery, rocket fire, according to local officials. Ukrainian forces subjected the city of Donetsk and its immediate vicinity to artillery. Multiple rocket launches fired on Sunday. The attacks killed 3 people. They damaged all sorts of civilian houses and infrastructure, buses. There, again, no military reason for this. The shelling targeted exclusively residential areas of the district. No military targets in sight. Nothing even close. As footage shared online by the mayor shows specifically, the shelling damaged at least 2 residential houses, debris hitting all local art school, shattering windows, damaging its entrance, 9 other residential houses, bus stops, buses damaged also. Who are you hitting when you shell a bus? Can anyone tell me who you're hitting when you hit a bus? Humans.
Non-military.
Non-military. I'm sorry, Russian soldiers are not using buses to get to and from the battlefield. Like, time to go to work, time to get to the battlefield. Let me hop this bus and stop by the mall. It's awful. Ukraine, by the way, using NATO weapons to carry out these attacks. Fired on residential areas using NATO weapons that you're paying for out of your dollars. No military purpose whatsoever. And according to reports, Ukrainian forces used these weapons, including artillery, multiple rocket launches. They blew up homes, infrastructure. They used German A2 mines, as well as 155 millimeter shells. By the way, we had Douglas McGregor on the show just a short time ago when we were talking about the shortage of the 155 millimeters. Weren't we, guys? They literally don't have them.
Yeah.
Right? They're pushing for the United States to make more of them and send more of the 155 millimeter shells to Ukraine. So they're using them here. They managed to get their hands on some, and they're using them here to attack civilian targets. So let's keep sending them. They really need these 155 millimeter shells.
All I want to say is it's a good thing they didn't get the other 70% of the weapons that we sent over there. This could have been worse.
Right. No shit. I mean, I know you're being facetious here. Like, all of this stuff goes missing right in the black market, which we're going to talk a little bit later about. But you're right. Like, maybe we should be thankful that it's now in the hands of ISIS, and not in the hands of the Ukrainian military and NATO forces specifically in field. 2 women were killed also in the city of Makivka, located immediately to the north of Donetsk. The city was hit with multiple rocket launches, at least 5 projectiles hitting residential areas. Disturbing footage also. I'm not going to show it to you here on the show because it's awful. Shows victims walking side by side, and then they hear this like incoming projectile, like old women, and they try to take cover. The rockets hit in the middle of the road, and they just like shred the women to pieces. Like, you do not want to see these videos. I watched them, so you don't have to. The Donetsk People's Republic was incorporated into Russia last year, in case you forgot. It is now Russia. This is Russia. So who's calling the shots here? Well, the Washington Post out with an explosive story this morning showing that, yeah, the U.S. is directing the Ukrainian military in just about everything they do. In fact, on the anniversary of the war, according to this Washington Post piece, it was crazy. The Ukraine wanted to launch massive attacks inside of Moscow, to which the NATO forces, which are running the show, basically had to talk the Ukrainians off the ledge and like, no, we're not doing that, because that would mean hell on earth would be rained down upon you. We're not doing that. Here's what we are going to do instead. Here's part of our new spring offensive that we're rolling out. So the Washington Post basically saying, we're running the show from top to bottom. We're telling them what to do, where to guide it. So when you see these civilian attacks, when you see these residential zone attacks, guess where they came from? They're using NATO weapons to carry out these attacks. Your tax dollars at work. Ukraine is begging for more weapons this morning because Ukraine now says, in this meeting in Ramstein, Germany over the weekend, they say our mission has changed. It is no longer about survival. It's about victory. So they go to Germany, they meet at Ramstein, they're meeting with NATO officials, and suddenly they do an about face. So instead of it, you're sending your weapons to help us survive in Ukraine. No. Now you're helping us because now it's about victory.
How are we defining victory? We need to take down the whole of Russia?
I guess, yeah. Take down the whole of Russia. Putin's eliminated. They take back all of the Donbass and Crimea, and that's victory. That's victory. So send them weapons. Get them weapons in. That's their new mission. It's not about survival anymore, according to this NBC piece and from officials who were there. Ukrainian officials sought pathway to victory with allies at Ramstein and then switched their thinking on how this is going to go forward. So Ukraine officials said last week they wanted to discuss their pathway to victory as they convene with allies with Ramstein on Friday. According to troops, they're preparing for another counteroffensive that will include a plethora of Western military equipment provided by the United States and other countries in attendance. Putin says, so you want to try and beat us on the battlefield? Okay, go ahead and try. Literally his words. Remember, he says, we haven't even started yet. And you're losing a battalion a day of soldiers. 400 to 600 men are being killed every day. In the past 2 weeks, we've seen thousands. But Putin says, you want to try to beat us on the battlefield? Go ahead and try.
Что нас хотят победить на поле боя. Ну, что здесь скажешь? Пусть попробуют. Мы уже много слышали, что Запад хочет воевать с нами до последнего украинца. Это трагедия для украинского народа. Но, похоже, все к этому и идет. Но все должны знать, что мы-то, по большому счету, всерьез пока еще ничего и не начинали. При этом мы не отказываемся и от мирных переговоров, но те, кто отказывается, должны знать, что чем дальше, тем сложнее им будет с нами договариваться.
Okay.
Not mincing words there. You want to beat us on the battlefield? Go ahead and try it. Okay, that was one takeaway. The other is, we haven't even started yet. Mm-hmm. You're fighting for the last Ukrainian, which seems like you're carrying that out. And by the way, we're still open for peace, but there's no one meaningfully trying to come to the table for peace. Sergei Lavrov in Washington, D.C. today. New York City, the United Nations, specifically talking about, we've been open for peace. We're here. The United States wouldn't even grant visas to the Russian reporters to come and cover the story in America.
Right. They're almost acting like he's not here and actively trying to pretend he's not here so that no Biden administration official has to meet with him or even say words about it, which is shameful.
Well, I find it so frustrating, too, to see Germany bringing Ukraine over and doing this when they forget what Russia did for them in World War II. Like, it's like, we don't care about that anymore. We're going to go over here. And we know what kind of people are in the Ukraine, and they know this. And so, and not everyone, you know what I'm talking about. I can't say it on YouTube because, but yeah. Like for them to side with Ukraine
and Z in there.
Yeah. For them to bring them over, that's like a slap in the face. And like, how do you get there? If I were German, I'd be like, we don't want any part of this. We can't be any part of this. Like, we don't want a dog in this fight.
The opposite. No, because today, news of the day here, Ukraine asks NATO for a boost in military support to deliver victory. And General Mark Milley announcing that the U.S. is moving 31 Abrams tanks to Germany, where Ukrainian soldiers will learn the weapon systems, Ukraine wants jets and other heavy equipment as well. So they're moving all of this stuff to Germany for training. So Ukrainians go into Germany. They're using that as I know, it's like such short memory. Let's go back 80 years to World War II.
And this is something that Germany had a big press cycle about when Olaf Scholz was refusing to send tanks of their own, saying we absolutely don't want tanks coming through here. This was just in December. We had a whole talk about how Germany was not going to do this because German citizens didn't want it. Olaf Scholz was being pressured by NATO, and he capitulated, finally gave them, and now not only their tanks, but more tanks can come through here. So that was a speed bump.
Right.
Glad we wasted our breath on that.
Speaking of weapons, the U.S. is fully aware that these weapons are going to Ukraine and then going right back to the black market. New reporting today from Seymour Hersh. The West knows Ukraine's weapons are leaking right to the black market. Poland, Romania, other countries are being flooded with arms intended for Ukraine. The Polish,
Yeah, but that's perfect though, because how are you guys going to keep the military-industrial complex going after wars if these weapons get out? Then it's like, oh, now we have another enemy.
Oh yeah, right. You're right. It's a great point. Right. It's a win-win for the military-industrial complex. They'll pay for them on the front end, and then once they get into the hands of our enemies, we'll then pay to restock our own supplies in order to go and fight them. That's what we've done repeatedly.
Right. Because you can't tell me that the United States military could not keep track of everything that they're sending and make sure that it reaches its destination.
No, they absolutely could.
That is ridiculous.
They absolutely could, because we just got word today from John Sopko, who is the former Afghanistan Inspector General. And a former Inspector General of Afghanistan, who was put in charge of auditing and tracking weapons in Afghanistan, says that we are going to see a pilferage of weapons and money in Ukraine. He says it's almost impossible to track. However, as he says, former IG John Spoko did an interview with a responsible statecraft, and he says, we could have stopped some of the excesses. Just look at the amount of money we're spending in Ukraine. It's about $113 billion. At that rate, he says, this summer we will surpass all of the money we've spent for reconstruction in Afghanistan for 20 years. And he says, this summer we will surpass all of the money we spent for a Marshall Plan to rebuild all of Europe after World War II. That money is flowing like manna from the sky.
Manna.
Manna.
It's the biblical reference.
Manna, I know. If you don't get in there soon, you're going to see pilferage. Well, we're already seeing that. But his point is that if we put some auditing mechanisms in place, he said, he gave some great examples in this interview. He says, do we even know that they can even use, or they are even using the things that we are sending to them? We send them these things. We have no way of knowing, A, are they even using them? Are they trained on them? Are they collecting dust in a corner because they're not touching them? And then are they being then sold off into the black market?
For profit of corrupt Ukrainians, possibly, which is what Seymour Hersh is positing.
Yeah, exactly.
And the thing is, like, when this conflict first broke out and the U.S. started sending weapons to Ukraine, we covered the fact that, like, the initial batch of weapons we sent were being loaded into the back of hatchback Volvos on the Polish-Ukrainian border and just driven in. And we're going to pretend like we didn't know that these things were ending up on the black market.
Right.
I mean, come on. Like, that's not exactly accounting 101.
Right.
That's
CNN reported that too, surprisingly, and CBS reported it and then retracted it. So that's also important.
And apologize for it. Yeah, exactly. We had this big report about how all the weapons are going missing, but then we decided to hold back on that report after somebody in the Biden administration made us upset about it, or was upset about it. Hey, please subscribe to the channel. I know I don't say it enough. Please subscribe if you're here. Nice to see all of your beautiful faces. We do this show live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern time, so subscribe and turn on the little bell notification. Finally, I wanted to talk about oil on this as it relates to Ukraine. So over the weekend, we learned that Ukraine is about to be sold out to the major U.S. oil companies. Who could have seen this coming? All of you, because you are all smart people who are watching this show. So we all saw this coming. We talked about this for months on this show, that this is exactly what was going to happen. The Financial Times reports that oil giants ExxonMobil, Halliburton, Chevron have all been meeting quietly, secretly, with Ukrainian state-run gas producer Naftogaz in order to increase output in war-torn country. So They said basically they're having a hard time convincing private companies to invest in Ukraine. So here's what we're going to do. We're basically going to turn over control to all of these oil giants. Chevron, Halliburton. Halliburton, that should ring a bell, of course. Halliburton, of course, headed by former U.S. Vice President Dick Cheney, profited massively, of course, from the war in Iraq. So this shouldn't come as a surprise to any of us that these oil companies are about to be getting all of the benefits, the spoils of war, the land. And we even had Citibank, right? Citibank executives last week admitting on camera they've got billions ready to deploy inside of Ukraine because it's a garrison state. If you needed any more evidence at all that this is a proxy war for us to destabilize a country, take it over, pilfer all of its resources, just look no further than this. Really, really disgusting.
Yeah.
We got more news to get to.
So shocking. So shocking.
I know, yeah.
Sometimes you see these stories and you're like, haven't I clicked this before? Or is this just a bad Groundhog's Day of like warmongering and war experience?
No, it's just rinse. Hey, why break it? Why fix it if it isn't broken, right? The military-industrial war complex knows that when they can go in and destabilize a country, then all of the money can pour in, all of the companies can go in and make money off of it, right? From the oil fields and the minerals and all of the resources. And they basically then get the protection of the U.S. military.
Yeah.
You know, almost have like your own bodyguards to go and do your bidding, whether it's Syria and Somalia, Ethiopia, just laundry list of them, you know?
Yeah.
Well, that's the kind of the point I was trying to make with them tracking these weapons. Like if they actually thought they were going to lose money or lose something out of losing these weapons, they do something about it. But they're gaining something because they let it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come